Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but
Today is August the 14th, and of course, this day, Anglican Bishop Alexander Kipsang Arap Muge, Bishop Muge was killed in a road accident on August the 14th, 1990, shortly after making a triumphal visit to Busia town.
amazing grace, how sweet.
Askofu Muge alipigania katiba ya Kenya.
I saw him drop his head, and I sensed that's the moment he died.
I'm also a victim of my resemblance with the late bishop.
In the House of Bishops, the issue of Katako was a hot potato.
Siasa ikiwa kali, sisi Muge akiambiwa kwamba asiende West Pokot, tayari usiku sisi tunasafiri.
And it was always assumed that Bishop Muge was talking with the ambassador of the US.
And yet the statement was not coming out clearly in the media that there was hunger in Pokot.
A minister who was a very prominent minister called Dr. Robert Ouko had also died.
When we went there and he read a verse, the president got annoyed, and he actually stood up and walked back and left us seated where we were seated.
Waskofu wetu ulikuwa unatambulika na kupatiwa heshima.
He sat with me on my bed as my wife was making tea.
In fact, when I came back from the US in 1985, we stayed in a house, in their house there in Elgon View, when we did not have a house.
Hivyo ndio ikaweza kuleta uadui kati yake na serikali ya Kenya.
The bishop was a loving man.
He told me, Davis, last night I've had a big dream, and I was preaching to very many people. It was a very big congregation, and the people were getting saved.
Not knowing that in the next 2 hours he's going to be dead.
He was very forthright in his statement.
Bwana asifiwe. Sisi kama kanisa la Kianglikana katika eneo hili la Bishop Muge Memorial Parish tunasherehekea miaka 5 tangu kuanzishwa kwa parokia hili, miaka 20 tangu kuanzishwa kwa kanisa hili la Bishop Muge Memorial Church, and then miaka 41 tangu waskofu wa Eldoret wanzishwe. Na waskofu huu katika kukua kwake kila wakati tunashukuru Mungu kwa waanzilishi mbalimbali, wale ambao walikuwa ni lay pamoja na wale ambao ni wachungaji na askofu. Na askofu ambaye tunasimulia hadithi yake ni Askofu Alexander Kipsang Muge, ambaye alichukua hatamu ya kuongoza uaskofu huu baada ya kutawaswa kwake mwaka wa 1983. Tunashukuru Mungu kwa umbali Mungu alimleta, akahudumu miaka 7 katika uaskofu wa Eldoret. Miaka 7 ambazo alitumika kwa uaminifu, kwa uadilifu. Theme ama lengo kubwa la kanisa mwaka huu, hasa kupitia kwa Bishop Muge Memorial Parish na pia local church, ni serving God with godly values. With godly values or virtues. Hizo mbili tunatumia pamoja. Na mara nyingi tunahudumu wakati kanisa mara nyingi inaulizwa maswali mengi Je, mnatumikia Mwenyezi Mungu kwa uaminifu na kwa bidii? Hili ni swali ambalo Wafilipi 4 mstari wa 4 inatukumbusha, whatever is lovely, whatever is noble, whatever is admirable, hizo zote, chochote ambacho kinafurahisha Mwenyezi Mungu, kupitia maadili hayo tunachikumbusha mwaka huu. Tunaombea kanisa katika kutumika katika kuhubiri neno na kufuata maadili hayo na kuguza mengine zaidi. Wakati huu tumekuwa na changamoto ya vijana wanajiita GNC katika kuelekea kutafuta ukweli katika taifa. Wametuuliza pia, we want to occupy the church, na tunataka kukaribisha waje kanisani ili tukuse pamoja maadili zinazohitajika katika taifa letu. Lakini maadili mazuri pia sio kutumia nguvu kwa namna ambayo haikubaliki. Tunafuata katiba. Kila wakati tuna katiba. Tumepigania, Askofu Muge alipigania katiba ya Kenya akitaka space, freedom of speech, na pia kuna mtu mwenye angesuiliwa kwa polisi kwa muda ambaye haingekubaliwa na sheria, kwa sababu yeye mwenyewe alikuwa ni polisi, alijua sana sheria ambazo ni za nchi. Na maparokia zingine over 58 parishes within our diocese, we pray that the Lord will use us to proclaim the same, from the smallest village to the biggest, from even our city Eldoret, ambaye mwaka huu inafanywa kuwa mji kati ya miji ambazo zimewekwa tayari baada ya Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, sasa ni Eldoret. Sisi kama kanisa ambayo iko hapa Eldoret, tutaendelea kuhubiria taifa kupitia mji wa Eldoret, kupitia kaunti jirani ya Uasin Gishu, Keyo Marakwet, na hata kaunti jirani ambazo kanisa imejumuishwa. The events surrounding the death of Bishop Muge arose from the clamor for a new diocese in Katakwa. There was a new diocese that had been created in 1989 called Nambale, and then after that Katakwa area felt that they were so changed. They would have liked to have their own diocese, and a representative certainly from within the Teso, from the Teso area. So Bishop Muge was elected in the house to act like a middle person, because the people of Katakwa had come to severally Nairobi looking for their own diocese. And so the House of Bishops decided to have a mediator. And Bishop Muge was considered a neutral person to represent Katakwa in that part. But about the same time, there were other challenges. The 90s were a very, very critical time. That was the time for clamor for multi-party, and there was always fear that Bishop Muge would support the multi-party cause. So at the national level, there was always that fear within the NSIS family that Bishop Muge would probably sway people to support the multi-party cause. When the area, because Moi was from around, the political class obviously was supporting Moi, even though silently. Even those who are of a different opinion would not voice their different voices. That was the era of the 90s. About the same time, a minister who was a very prominent minister called Dr. Robert Ouko had also died. So there were about 3 political potatoes, hot potatoes at that time. In the House of Bishops, the issue of Katakwa was a hot potato. But Bishop Muge was able to hold it, to say, we want to talk with the people of Katakwa. Political hot potato of the death of Robert Ouko. And it was always assumed that Bishop Muge was talking with the ambassador of the US and may have revealed probably some of the underground goings that led to the death of Dr. Robert Ouko. And then now the potato of the multi-party. KANU was the only party at that time. And the law did not allow other parties to operate. So Bishop Muge being very vocal, plus the other bishop, Okulu, and then Kitari, and then there was also Njoya from the PCA. Those were the vocal voices. And then there was Ndingi, Moana, and Zeki. So those were the vocal voices who would say any politician who dare speak would be sent out of the party. They would be expelled. So these three potatoes played a very big part, probably in the death of Bishop Muge. Probably politically, those on politics could say Bishop Muge would sway people to support multipartyism. Two, Bishop Muge may reveal some of the details because he was privy to some of the probably people within government who wanted some truth out of the matter of Ouko to come out. So I think those who are involved also would have had a hand in trying to silence Bishop Muge. And then certainly the one I've mentioned, Katakwa within the House of Bishops. Some bishops would say, if we allow Katakwa to agitate for their own, other dioceses will be going the same way. But Bishop Muge said, why don't we give it a try? Let us speak about it. So locally also, there was a department that had been begun called Justice and the one about Shuri, Justice and Peace Desk. And some of the officers in that included Mbugwa, at one time the chief editor of Beyond, a very popular and sometimes very vocal Christian magazine. And then there was, other than him, there was Shuri, who was a lawyer, who was involved in legal issues. And there were a lot of claims that a very powerful minister who is now deceased, Biwot, had taken a lot of mashambas from some people within. And so the office was reporting some of this information about their land being kind of taken and so on. And so basically you can see the forces that may have consigned or confined themselves to want to have Bishop Muge out of the way. So he would have been buried on, the government would have allowed Bishop Muge to be buried on 23rd. He was buried on 22nd. 22nd was the memorial day for Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. Mzee Jomo Kenyatta was buried on 22nd of August 1978. And ever since that burial date, the president would attend. So State House tried to ask the church, can you have Bishop Muge's date moved from 22nd to 23rd? And the Standing Committee of Synod, including those from the province who are now organizing also, who are involved, Manasseh Kuria as the Archbishop and the others, say no, we shall stick with our date 22nd. Because the president would have wanted to come. But because of the fears that the government had a hand in it, so that is how they could not move the date. Ikabaki kwa 22nd. So he was buried on 22nd of 1990. So those are some of the matters that are there. We know that the matter has not been concluded. What happened thereafter was the diocese wanted to have an inquest as to how Bishop Muge died. It was agreed at the initial phases, but later on the state brought in Mr. Bernard Chunga, who later on became the Chief Justice. They brought in, and Chunga said there shall be no inquest. We shall go on with prosecuting Mr. Monai, who was said to have been the driver of the lorry that killed Bishop Muge. And so the matter ended like that. They did not want an inquest. The matter was closed like that. This man was prosecuted, and then he died a few years in prison. So that is how the matter ended. And without an inquest, we would have had the full detail of what were some of those innings and outings surrounding and before, on or before the death of Bishop Muge. But many times, obviously, his phone calls would be tapped. He He would make a call and he realizes some people are actually listening quietly as to what he was saying. So we want to say we shall continue to look for a way in which anything surrounding him will be declassified so that the truth can come out as to how he died and who was involved and what were the reasons for the same. So those were the 90s, a very difficult time also. This was when Berlin Wall also collapsed globally. Berlin Wall, which was separating East and West Germany, collapsed, and Germany became one. There was East Germany and West Germany. Many nations were born out of the old USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, because of the same. Romania, there was a dictator who was there who also died, and several other dictators also disappeared, because now there was a new clamor for freedom of expression, many parties, human rights expanded, human rights matters expanded than ever before. The old colonial big boys who would be protected by the colonial powers began to fold away and to leave them. So the 90s now opened up many things. By 1992, Kenya was a multi-party state. So ungepata chama inaitwa Forum of the Restoration of Democracy, and then baadaye wakasaa Ford Kenya, baadaye Ford People, Ford Asili, many other parties. And Moi was very happy also politically to have those parties also split so that it was easy for him also to work. So those were the 90s, and how the church also played their part in voicing issues that are very central to the people of the Republic, including individuals who may have been in need of rights and justice on their part.
Bwana asifiwe tena. Kwa majina naitwa William Rugut. Nimeokoka, Kristo ni Bwana. Nimezaliwa miaka 66 yaliyopita. Mnamo mwaka wa 1983 baada ya Askofu Muge kuwekwa kiti tarehe 5 mwezi wa 6, niliweza kupatana na wazee ambao waliniambia tuje tumsalamie baba askofu katika ofisi yake kule Elgonview. Nakumbuka ilikuwa tarehe 21 mwezi wa 6, na nilikuwa na mzee the late David Cheluget na mzee mwingine anaitwa Wilson Chuma. Tukiwa katika ofisi ambao ilikuwa ni nyumba ya askofu na pia ilikuwa ni ofisi, the late then treasurer wa diocese Isaac Chirchir akatangaza kwamba katika ofisi ya askofu kunahitajika mtu wa kusaidia kazi katika office messenger. Na hapo nikaandika barua kuomba hiyo kazi, nikafanywa interview na nikapatiwa nafasi kuambiwa ni report kazini tarehe 1 mwezi wa 7 mwaka huo wa 1983. Kufika ofisi nikapata wakiwa watu wawili, baba askofu the late Muge na secretary wake ambaye kwa sasa ni mchungaji Reverend Mary Oteka akiwa Kisumu Diocese. Nikiwa nikifanya kazi yangu ya umessenger katika ofisi, nilichumuika kufanya kazi ya ofisi nikiwa office messenger na pia kufanya kazi ya usafi. Ninapoendelea na kazi zozote, Wakati wa mchana ni wakati ambao naenda town post office kupeleka mabarua na pia kurudisha yale ambao yametumwa katika ofisi ya askofu. Na ninapoendelea na kazi hiyo nilifanya kufika baada ya mwaka huo wa 83 other staff waliweza kujiunga na ofisi, na ofisi ikakuwa kupata watu kutoka sehemu mbalimbali wakuja kufanya kazi katika uaskofu. Wakati huo Bishop aliweza kuchukua kazi ya kanisa katika uenezaji neno la Mungu na pia kufikia wananchi kwa kazi za maendeleo. Bishop aliweza pia kuanzisha idara ambayo ilikuwa inaitwa IRDB, Integrated Rural Development, ambao aliweza kujumuika na donors kutoka sehemu za nje, na pia waliweza kufund the programs katika ofisi ya askofu ambazo ziliendelea kugrow kwa kazi za maendeleo. Bishop akieneza kazi ya Injili pia alijumuika kufanya kazi ya maendeleo kupitia departments ambazo ziliweza kuanzishwa katika ofisi ya askofu. Kulikuwa na department ya agriculture ambayo ilikuwa ina deal na mambo ya ukulima, ilikuwa ina deal na mambo ya biashara. Kulikuwa na department ya biashara ya agriculture, pia ilikuwa ina deal na mambo ya livestock. Pia kulikuwa na idara ya elimu, education department. Kulikuwa na pia idara ya health department ambaye ilikuwa inaongozwa na Canon Omanyo, who is still with us. Kulikuwa na department ya training department ambaye ilikuwa inaongozwa na member pia wa kanisa hili, that is Mrs. Dorcas Serem, na other departments ambazo zilikuwa zinafanya kazi ya maendeleo. Kazi ya kanisa iliweza kunawiri na kupanuka katika uaskofu wetu wa Eldoret. Wakati huo uaskofu wetu ilikuwa inakava kwa wakati huu 6 counties: kaunti ya Turkana, kaunti ya West Pokot, kaunti ya Trans Nzoia, kaunti ya Elgeyo Marakwet, kaunti ya Uasin Gishu na kaunti ya Nandi. Sehemu hizo zote tulikuwa kufikia idara ya maendeleo, na tunapofikia idara za maendeleo ilikuwa inajumuisha kuleta kanisa pamoja, ikiambatanisha na hizo kazi za miradi. Kazi hizo zote ziliweza kufanya kanisa la CPK wakati huo, baadaye kurudishwa jina la ama kurudishwa kwa sasa Anglican Church, kuweza kupata kunawiri. Maana kwetu sisi tulipokuwa tukitoka tukienda sehemu za nje outside the Diocese of Eldoret, tukiwa Central, tukiwa Mombasa, tukiwa Western, uaskofu wetu ulikuwa unatambulika na kupatiwa heshima kupitia usimamizi wa waskofu ama baba askofu wetu ambao alikuwa amejulikana katika nchi ya Kenya. Tuliweza kuona kazi ikinawiri na kuweza kuendelea kwa njia ya bidii. Baba askofu pia akiwa akishikilia kazi ya kanisa na kuona imepata kuimarika, alipata pia kuona kwamba wamama wamepata kupewa kuwa wachungaji katika waskofu wetu. Hiyo idara ya kukaribisha wamama kuwa wachungaji ilikuja wakati wake ambapo haikuwa rahisi kumpa mama mamlaka kanisani, lakini bishop akiweza kusimama na kuweza kupigania hiyo haki, aliweza kuona kwamba wamama wamepata kukaribishwa na kuwekwa kuwa wachungaji katika waskofu wetu. Kazi ya askofu iliweza kupeleka kanisa mbali kwa huo muda wa miaka 7 bishop akiwa ofisi. Mimi nikiwa dereva wake, baada ya kupatiwa promotion after attaining my driving school in 1987, 1988 nikapewa kuwa his driver, ambao pia kazi tukifanya, bishop alikuwa akiwa na uhusiano na idara za serikali, akiwa na mpango ya kwenda Nairobi, kama amepanga na idara ya health department ama amepanga na idara ya education department, Ministry of Education, ama hata na pengine kwenda katika ofisi ya rais. Bishop akiingia ama akiniambia kwamba tunaenda Nairobi, tunaanza safari saa 9 usiku, na akiingia kwa gari ananiambia kwamba ako na appointment na waziri wa afya katika Afya House. Yangu ni kuhakikisha saa 2 askofu ako kwa mlango kuingia katika ofisi hiyo. Kwa hivyo bishop kazi yake aliweza kujumuisha, akiweza kuweka kanisa na kumerge na mahitaji ya Wakristo, mahitaji ya wale ambao wamehitimu katika elimu zao, kama pengine nurses. Anaomba na kufanya uhusiano na waziri wa afya. Tukienda Nairobi, anaenda na ombi hizo kupeana maombi zao. Kama ni ya walimu, pia kwa TSC anafanya the same. Na hata pia wengine ambao walikuwa wanaenda pia katika maofisi ya security. Haya yote Bishop Muge aliweza kutilia maanani na kuweza kuona kwamba ameweka kanisa pamoja na mahitaji ya Mkristo mwananchi apate yale mahitaji ambao anaendeleza naye katika maisha yake. Katika sehemu ambazo walikuwa na haja za vyakula, Muge alikuwa akifanya mipango hasa hata na idara za World Food Program. Nakumbuka wakati moja siasa ikiwa kali, sisi Muge akiambiwa kwamba asiende West Pokot, tayari usiku sisi tunasafiri, kuamka asubuhi barabara kufungwa, sisi tuko mahali inaitwa Kacheliba tunapeana chakula. Serikali inapotangaza kwamba Muge asikanyake pale, sisi tayari tuko kwa ground tunapeana chakula. Kwa hivyo Muge aliweza kuangalia mahitaji ya mwananchi kwa ujumla, kwa kiroho na mahitaji ya kimwili. Kwa hivyo Muge aliweza kuzingatia na kuona haja za mwananchi zimefikiwa kikamilifu. Pia alikuwa akiona kwamba mambo ya corruption kwa nchi, Muge alikuwa akizingatia kuona kwamba hayo yameweza kutupiliwa mbali. Ndiposa hata ikafika wakati viongozi waliokuwa wakihusika na mambo ya corruption hawakuwa wakiona vyema kuweza kuwa pamoja ama kuintegrate na Muge, kwa sababu alikuwa anavichua yale maovu ambao walikuwa wakiatenda. Hivyo ndio ikaweza kuleta uadui kati yake na serikali ya Kenya. Kwa hivyo wakati Muge alikuwa akifanya yale ambao yanahitajika kuona mwananchi na Mkristo ameweza kupata yale mahitaji ya kila siku, yeye aliona ama aliweka kibao mbele kuweza kuona kwamba hayo yote yamefikiwa. Kwa upande wa elimu, Bishop alikuwa akiyatilia maanani kuona kwamba elimu katika nchi, elimu katika vijana wetu na katika community imeweza kuzingatiwa. Aliweza kuona yale mashule ambao yanasimamiwa na kanisa, yeye alikuwa mstari wa mbele kuona kwamba yamefanya vyema, na zile mashule ambazo zilikuwa zinahitaji usaidizi ya kuweza kufanya wamepata kuendelea, Muge alikuwa anaenda an extra mile hata ya kuweza kusource money na kuweza kununua plot. Kwa mfano Kablelach High School, the plot ambaye Kablelach High School iko ilinunuliwa na diocese, na Bishop aliweza kuona kwamba shule hiyo imeweza kushika na imeweza kupata kutumika. Kwa hivyo Bishop, mimi kwangu nilipofanya kazi naye kwa miaka 7, ile kazi ambayo Bishop alifanya ilikuwa inalinganishwa na almost 20 years. Na kama Mungu angeweza kumfunika kutokana na ile ajali ambao ilipata kwenda na maisha yake, nafikiri kanisa na nchi ingepata kwenda mbali. Safari ya kwenda Busia, Muge alipanga magari 5 kwa mkia siku hiyo, na akaniweka niwe kwa kari ambao ilikuwa inaongoza msafara, akinitoa kwa gari yake ambao mimi labda pengine ningemwendesha kumpeleka, akaniweka kwa gari ya kuongoza msafara na 5 staff ndani ya gari yangu. The total of 5 vehicles. Car number 2 was being driven by Tom Pirgen, other staff inside. Car number 3 was being driven by Bishop himself, whereby in the morning tunapojitayarisha kutoka, and after knowing that Omanyo was to be in the Bishop's car, I cautioned Omanyo as the Bishop's driver, kwamba please take care of the Bishop. But unfortunately, the Bishop did not give him the vehicle to drive. Bishop himself drove the vehicle. It was until when we reached there, after accomplishing the mission in Busia and having a stopover at Luanda. At that time, when we were coming from Busia, people were hungry, so they stopped at Luanda, running for bananas because of the hunger. At that point, the Bishop told us he's organized a late lunch for us at Golf Hotel. So we came through Golf Hotel. We had a round table lunch. The Bishop was hosting us. From there, after the lunch, we continued with our journey, reaching Wepuye, Chimoi Road. The Bishop overtook us and went ahead of us. The people who were in my vehicle were making something like a fun, because when I was driving, they themselves were checking, where is the Bishop? When they see him, they say, there he is. When in a corner or in a forest where he was not visible, theirs was to concentrate and to see, where is the Bishop? When they see him, they say, there he is. Reaching Kipkaren River, before the bridge, towards Kipkaren River, the Bishop was entering the railway bridge. When you are at Kipkaren ng'ambo ile, ng'ambo hii kuna daraja ya reli. So when you are ng'ambo the other side of the bridge, the Bishop was entering the railway bridge. So unfortunately, when the bishop was being hit, we assumed we were just at the valley down, and he was hit at the upper side. Just when we reached where they were hit, I saw Brother Omanyo standing in the middle of the road, stopping us. And when we look aside, we realized that the bishop's car has been involved in an accident. And that is how we found him dead. If the bishop was to say anything, I was the one, because I went straight and tried calling him, but unfortunately, he had died. Bishop died on the spot. And that is how I interacted with the late bishop, working with him for that period of 7 years. Thank you.
My life history with the late Bishop Alexander Muge spanned a few years. I came to Eldoret in 1987 November. So I was here in 1988, having come from Lodwar, where I worked as a medical officer. My name is Professor Willis Owino Ngor. I should have started from there. And in 1988, one morning, the bishop visited Nyayo Ward with an uncle of his. And I was in the sister's office. I heard him ask, he wanted to see Dr. Owino. So he was brought to the office, and I saw this tall gentleman wearing the pink shirt that the bishop's put on. And I recognized him because I'd seen him in the newspapers. So I identified myself, and he introduced his uncle to me, who was supposed to go for surgery because of a recurrent ulcer. After talking to him, I asked him that, can he give me maybe a week or two? I try some medicine on his uncle. If he responds well, then there's no need for surgery. And if he does not respond well, then we'll have to go for surgery, as he was advised. So he gave me 2 weeks, and I put the patient on some medicine. Fortunately, God worked through that medicine. After 2 weeks, the bishop actually came back to the hospital with the uncle and told me that the gentleman was doing very well. So we continued the treatment, and he never went for surgery. That somehow brought us very much together, and he also realized that I was an Anglican, and we would meet in the youth service in the St. Matthew's. The next meeting was at Kimalel grounds when the diocesan meeting was there. I went there late, but somehow he saw me from the crowd and sent somebody to call me, and I had a chance to sit with the clergy in front, and I felt a little bit uncomfortable, but he put me there and introduced me to the whole diocese, and he said that any sick person in this diocese who wants medical care should look for Dr. Owino Ngor at Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital. So we became very close. It so happened again in that year, I'd already met my spouse currently, and we were planning to get married. And I asked him to see us through the stages before we get married. Unfortunately, my wife-to-be was posted to Kagumo TTC in Nyeri, and I was here in Eldoret. Now, when I mentioned that to him, he told me, how can I lead you into this area when somebody's in Nyeri and you are here? And I remember Bishop Muge called me to his office here at the Hill. I went, and he picked his phone and called the principal of Kagumo. He was called Kagume. And they just spoke when I was there, and he told him that I cannot do my work as a clergy when one of the people I need to talk to is in your college, and I need her in Eldoret. So by the use of phone, having talked to that Kagume of Nyeri, and he also talked to Bambua, who was at Chepkoilel, My wife-to-be was transferred the same week to Chepkoilel. That was the love that Bishop Muge had for me. And he would always, days of the meeting, dispatch a diocesan vehicle to pick her first in college and pick me to his office. And he gave me a warning that never should I be seen with the lady alone, and no time should I drop the lady, have the lady dropped first, then I'm brought second. From the office, I would be dropped first to my place near the hospital, and then they'll drop her to college. So when I approached him and asked him to kindly officiate our wedding, he gladly agreed. And that time we had been very close. I would visit him up at his house, and he never shied away from visiting me in my house where I was staying as a bachelor. He would come in his attire, his collar and his shirt, and people wondered how could Bishop Muge, whom they were reading in the newspaper and hearing in the media, just walk into this young man's room and sit there. That was Bishop Muge. So when I asked him to conduct our wedding, he accepted gladly. But there was a catch. The catch was that he had arrived with the government at that time. And I remember what the driver was saying. He had gone to Pokot, where he found there was hunger and went to distribute food. And yet the statement was not coming out clearly in the media that there was hunger in Pokot. So he went and did what he did there. That time now, my wedding was just around the corner, and he was supposed to go for Lambeth Conference in London. He went to Lambeth Conference. When he was away, the brethren were to Kutenreza, who were actually working with me towards making my arrangement of wedding, asked me to drop him from being the one to officiate because of that tension which was there. And I refused. I told them, you go and tell him yourself, and they didn't. So when it was just a week to the wedding, he had not come back from London, and I was so worried. But then he came. He rang me through the hospital landline. He rang from London through the hospital landline and talked to me and assured me that he will be in St. Stephen's Cathedral, Kisumu, to conduct my wedding on that Saturday, 13th of August. So I relaxed, and sure enough, I arrived in Kisumu for the wedding in the church, and within a few minutes he was there dressed, and he conducted our wedding. That was Bishop Muge for you. When he had done our wedding, that was in 1988, I went back to Nairobi for my studies, and I was staying in a bed-sitter at near Kenyatta Hospital called Remtula Wing. I remember one evening, he was traveling out of the country, and he came to see us in the bed-sitter. My wife was very uncomfortable. The bishop walking in this bed-sitter place in a flat. He sat with me on my bed as my wife was making tea on this stove, Kitambi Nane. You remember that stove? So she was making tea, and we were sitting on the bed and chatting with my bishop. That was Bishop Alexander Kipsang Muge. We chatted very well, almost stayed there for about an hour, then eventually they left for the airport. Now, as I sit here, I'm also a victim of my resemblance with the late bishop. I got arrested one time. They thought I was Bishop Muge. We had planned the day before, after Pokot, he was going to St. Barnabas, Kapsabet. So we met in his house at night, a day before, that was a Saturday, and planned her, we had supper together. The Reverend Diego, I can't remember the other name, from Kapsabet, took him at night to Kapsabet. And the next morning, I used a diocesan vehicle with Dr. Peterson. I think it was called Peterson. We used a a Subaru, and I was seated there in the demonstration vehicle going for the service in Kapsabet. On reaching Mosoriot, there was a roadblock. And in that roadblock, I was asked where I was going, and I was honest enough. I said I was going to Kapsabet for a church service. And they went to and called the inspector, who came and asked me for my identity card. I gave my identity card written Owin Ongor. He asked me, "Is this your identity card?" I said, "Yes, it is. What's the problem?" And he asked me, "Are you not Bishop Muge?" I said, "No, I'm not Bishop Muge." So he told me, because of security reasons, we are going back to the police station in Eldoret. So we turned on our way back to Eldoret with them. But on the way, using this, what do you call it, they got a message that Bishop Muge has already entered the church at St. Barnabas. So they left me. And the news reached Bishop. He went all the way from Kapsabet. When he finished, he came straight to my house near the hospital there and asked me to explain to him what happened. And I explained to him, and we drove in his car to his office. He went, rang a BBC, Voice of America, and he was complaining about a number of things. But I remember telling the bishop that because the arrows that are hitting you may be many, I'm going to leave my beards. So I left these beards down here and a mustache. Those who saw me that time had a mustache and some beards. The brethren in Teresa Fellowship were not happy with me because of that, but I was with that for some time because I wanted not to be confused with him. To make the story short, the bishop was a loving man. He was very thorough in what he was doing. He was very firm against any activities that militated against the word of God, and he was very forthright in his statement. He's the one who took me for the first time to Kabarak to meet the president. I was in his car when he went with the diocesan staff to Kabarak to meet the president, when they now thought things were cooling. When we went there and he read a verse, the president got annoyed, and he actually stood up and walked back and left us seated where we were seated. And after he walked back, he was there with the late Bargetuny and others. We were just told to leave quickly. So we left, and I remember him saying in the vehicle that we are back to square one. And he drove us back, and he dropped me up to my place. And unfortunately, the following year he passed on. I came to know about it. It was very painful. I went to Lee funeral. The press people thought I was the brother. I had to stop them, and I said, I don't want my pictures to appear in any publication. I'm not the brother, I'm a friend. And we went and saw his body there. I was at the funeral here, and the family were very close to us and to me. And Elizabeth, who is in the U.S., was there. He graced all our weddings with his father. I have some pictures that I think I'll share. And it is nice to have this occasion to remember a great man of God who fought selflessly and relentlessly for this country's emancipation with Bishop Muge and Bishop Gitari. And he made me rub shoulders with all those bishops with whom they were in the fight for this country. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to take this opportunity to welcome you all to Bishop Muge Memorial Chapel Church. As you're all aware, this is the church that is named after our late bishop, and it has a long history because the pioneers of this church, which include Paul Pirech, as you all know, were all members of St. Matthew's Cathedral. But it reached a point where we thought about ourselves in old age. We wanted a church which is very close to our homes so that our grandmothers, our grandchildren can be able to walk to the church. So we had a conversation to quite a number of us who are around, including Herma, including Salinas Sang, and of course, Paul Birech. And we talked to Mama Irma, who accepted to host us in the garage in our house. That was around 2006, 2007. And we started praying there until a point where the numbers increased. Then we moved to the tent outside our house. And then eventually we decided to buy this land here where the church is situated now. And of course, we started with the Mapati church out there. So it has been a long journey, and we are seeing this very beautiful building that we have here, named after our bishop. Bishop Muge was a great man. I want to say so because my wife was one of the pioneers. I think William Rugut, you know. She was one of the pioneers that worked in the bishop's office when she returned from the US in 1982 and joined the pioneers of the Diocese of Eldoret in our office, in that office, and worked until about, I think she worked for 10 years there. And the experience I have is that Bishop was a great man. In fact, when I came back from the US in 1985, we stayed in a house, in their house there in Elgon View, when we did not have a house. She housed us for about 3 months while we were looking for a house here in Eldoret. A great man indeed, a great man of God, which I want to appreciate our bishop, Bishop Ruto, who was accepted to come and open this church on the 18th. And of course, all of us who are here today. Bishop Muge, as we all know, was a man who loved everybody. He wanted Kenya to be peaceful, and he wanted Kenyans to be united as per our national anthem. And you could see even that last day when he died, because when he was coming from Busia, I met him at Luanda. I had gone there for lunch. And he was so jovial, not knowing that in the next 2 hours he's going to be dead. So let us celebrate the week, because we know the week of celebration is from 11th to 18th. And we, as Bishop Muge Memorial Church or Chapel, we really want to make this church even a place where any information that we need to know about Bishop Muge, we should find it here. So we need to write a lot of history. We need to get information from William. I think you know a lot. So that we can keep anything that we need to keep. We keep it in Bishop Muge Memorial Chapel. Or even in the parish itself. We call it parish. We can keep it here. So that any visitor that comes here 50 years, 100 years to come, I mean, they should be able to get information about this great man that loved God and loved everybody. So I want again to say thank you, our Archdeacon and our curate. Thank you for organizing us. I think it is good that we are here. We are preparing, and I think we are ready. As you have seen, the church is beautiful. We are only waiting for that day of celebration so that we can all come here and celebrate together. So I want to thank you again. Thank you, Bishop, for joining us this morning. And we look forward to a great week and a great day on the 18th of August. Thank you, and may God bless you.
I came to know Bishop Muge, the late Bishop Alexander Muge, in 1986 when I was working in Kitale, then Kitale District, as the Deputy District Public Health Officer. He welcomed me into Kenya Anglican Youth Organization, because that time he was the chairperson of the Kenya Anglican Youth Organization in the church. After welcoming me in the church, I was at St. Paul's Church in Kitale. I was interested after his sermon to what he was doing. So when an opportunity came and he advertised for a position in the Diocese of Eldoret as he wanted somebody to do community health coordinator, I applied. In 1989, I came for interview, and I remember that's May, and after going through the interview, he recognized me as one of the youth in Kitale Church, St. Paul's. And I went through the interview, and he insisted that I remain for me to be told my results. And the afternoon at around 3-4, he called me and told me I got the position. And after 2 weeks, I came to start working in the Diocese of Eldoret as the community health coordinator in the diocese, where we interacted very well. I came to learn that as working the diocese as a staff, everybody had to write a schedule from first of the month to the end of the month and submit it to the bishop's office. So there was interaction between the bishop and the staff, especially on Mondays. We would start devotions together. Then after that, on Tuesday, some of us would go to his office to give a report and also share with him our plan for the month. And as I was doing this, I came to interact with him more and more. Though people thought he's a very harsh person, I found him very, very fatherly. He used to help me in many areas of work, and I really liked the way he used to do his work, because you go to the office, no matter how early you would go, you'll find the bishop in the office. So I wondered, what time does the bishop come in the office? I used to think that by 7 a.m. I'm the earliest, but I wasn't the earliest. I would go and find the bishop already in the office at 6, and we continue, and he would be the last person to leave the office at 10. I came to like his style of working because he was very focused and very open, and asked questions that needed answers. So there was no way out. You tell Bishop different things. He wanted clear questions and answers. And I came to learn that, and we became very close. I learned his style of working. And also having learned that he was in the armed forces, and I had also just left the armed forces, we struck a relationship because we knew the behaviors of each other. And so I was very open to him. And he came to like me because whatever he told me, I told him openly. I never went around answering him. If he asked me a question, I would respond and would sit in his office. And somehow we came to like each other that way. And so on many occasions, he would ask me to drive along with him. On many occasions, like going to Nairobi in the evening, he would say, Omanyo, he would walk to my house and say, are you ready? You have to take me to Nairobi, we can drive together. And we would go, two of us without the driver. That time he did not need a driver. At times, he would tell me, in the evening tomorrow we shall be going to West Pokot. And we drive to West Pokot very early in the morning. At times we'd wake up at 2 in the night to drive to West Pokot. We did that on many occasions. And so this moment we had visited Mount Elgon. This was the Katakwa diocese issue, and he had been asked to be responsible for Katakwa diocese. So we visited the mountain, and while at the mountain, he was talking, and what was happening at that time, the late minister for Foreign Affairs, Dr. Robert Ouko, had passed on, and somehow under difficult circumstances. So when we were on the mountain, he pronounced that he was going to name some of these people that could have killed the late Foreign Affairs Minister Robert Ouko. And from that moment, we started receiving hostility. The government started sending special branch at that time. They used to be called special branch, and maybe it's NIS these days. So these people used to start monitoring where we were going. So when we left the mountain, when he said that the following day is going to go to Busia, and when he's in Busia, he's going to speak some of the things that were not very comfortable with the government. At that moment, we had another minister in the cabinet, who was called Okondo. He pronounced that if he went to Busia, he would not come back alive. And so the bishop had that challenge, being warned not to go to Busia. If going to Busia, not come back alive. And so Bishop decided that because his mission, he's a servant of God, and nobody can stop him where to go in any part of this country. So he decided that we go to Busia. So on this very day, we left for Busia many vehicles from the office. We went as a department and some of the clergy. We left to go to Busia because Busia was partly in Nambare, their houses, or partly in Katakwa. They were still struggling where the boundary was. So Bishop decided that we go to Busia, and while going to Busia, he called me in his office and told me I'm driving with him. I was not aware that we were going to drive together. So Bishop and two of his secretaries, the late Claire Kirubo and Rhoda, who is in the US, were the secretaries of the bishop. So we boarded the vehicle. Other staff left us behind the office. And while he was at the office, he reached out, he called a few places. And I remember talking, when I went to his office, I remember hearing him saying that I'm going to Busia, and in case I die, then the government will be responsible. He was talking to somebody over the phone. Then we came out, got the car. And that car he had just bought, it was less than 1 month old. It was a Peugeot 405. So I drove it on the way to Busia. When we were driving to Busia, we met some of our cars on the way, but we passed through the convoy. And after reaching Bungoma, we started experiencing the special branch Land Rovers following us. So we started dodging and driving faster. There are very many on the road. They were following us. We knew they were following us because they were almost not giving us way. So we would shoot past them. So we had them in Bungoma, we had them in Magoro, and we had them in Malava. So when we reached Malava, because Busia is my district of origin, I knew the road from Malava to Busia very well. I drove past that moment, past the cars, and drove straight to Busia using a shortcut at Alupe. I went straight to Busia town, to the St. Stephen's Church. But when we were at St. Stephen's Church, the bishop said, no, let's go and see the town. So we drove the town, and he decided to walk from town to St. Stephen's. And there we saw a big crowd. But just as we were going to Busia, the bishop shared with me a dream he had. He told me, Davis, last night I've had a big dream, and I was preaching to very many people. It was a very big congregation, and people were getting saved. And so, to my limited knowledge, when we reached Busia and I saw many people following him, I said, oh, this is the crowd that the bishop has been talking about. But that was not really the case. So after addressing a big crowd in St. Stephen's Church in Busia, we left at around 1:02 there, and we changed our direction of coming back to Eldoret. We took the Kisumu Road. And as we were driving, he stopped me and said, Davis, because you are going to go to Nairobi with, I was going to go to Nairobi with his wife, who was going to Mothers Union, and I was going to do other meetings. He said, let me drive, because you are going to drive immediately to reach Eldoret. So I gave him the car. I started driving. We drove very comfortably and not at a high speed. We reached a place called Luanda. At Luanda, there was a roadblock. And at the roadblock, he talked to a few policemen, and one specific policeman with the rank of inspector came to him, and they talked in Kalenjin. And then, because I didn't understand Kalenjin that time, I didn't know what they were talking about. But immediately we left the roadblock with the policemen. We changed our direction. Instead of going to Kisumu, we decided to go to Kakamega. Our first initial journey was to go to Kisumu, go to Kapsabet, and come to Eldoret. But now we changed and went to Kakamega, where we reached around 3, and somehow we stopped and told all the people in the convoy that we go and meet in Kakamega Golf Hotel, where we sat for lunch. And after lunch, we had a lunch really that many of us all the time we refer to it as our last supper, because that's the time we had the last meal with him. And he talked with us in a very jovial mood, encouraging us. Bishop was a very straight person. Bishop was a person who did not mix things. When something is wrong, he mentioned it. If the government was doing anything wrong, he talked about it. Even he called the media and addressed the media, and he made things straight all the time. He was never compromised in any way. And that's why he taught us, never be compromised. Say what's right and make people walk in the light. That was always what he told. Make sure that you say the truth so that everybody can walk with you in the light. And we loved that. That's something he left in us. So after Kakamega, we let the convoy go. We stayed in Kakamega for about 15 minutes. We sensed people could have known where we were. And so we delayed in Kakamega for around 15 minutes, and the other cars left. After 15 minutes, he took up the car and started driving. We drove. It was a bit fast. We passed all the convoys before even reaching Kavirengo, the junction of Webuye and Kakamega. And then we drove straight into Eldoret. As we were driving, we were talking. He asked me many things. We talked about very many political things in the government. He shared with me very many things. I was not happy with what some ministers were doing in the government, and somehow how they were misleading the president. So he was a very open person, and the issues of land was very critical to him, because some of the ministers, some of the government, some of the provincial commissioners and DCs were taking land away, and he was never happy with this. He used to mention this to the president, and so many people did not like that. And I think that's how he built enmity around government leaders. And so on our way to Eldoret, we were driving very smoothly, nicely, and after Kipkaren, at the junction about 3 or 4 kilometers from Kipkaren River, at the turn, we spotted a lorry coming from in front, and immediately
with full lights on.
And we were hit. We were following a trailer behind, and we were hit and pushed about, it could be 200 feet or so behind. The lorry was low rolling, and that's the moment I realized I may have lost consciousness for some few seconds, only to wake up and found ourselves in a smashed car that's broken into many pieces. I came out, I touched myself and strapped myself, and walked through the front of the car. And after walking in front of the car, I went to the side door, or the driver's door, to try to pull the door so that he could get out, but the steering wheel had smashed all his ribs. And so I saw him drop his head, and I sensed that's the moment he died. Then I walked to the road to stop other people who were coming. The director then, Rotino, and Evelyn, they put me into their car and rushed me to Memorial Hospital. And that's how the day was. I miss, and that's the much I can remember. One of the things I miss about Bishop Muge is that he moved people, he talked to people openly, he never promised you anything he could not do. What he promised you, he did it. And he loved his staff. He loved his clergy. Because I remember when there was a problem in Kiwawa with one of our pastors, we drove there in the night at 2 to save the priest who was being disturbed by the government officials. And also when things were challenging in the forest in Nandi, we went there to meet the people. So he was a person who did not want any Christians or any member of a community disturbed. He preached reconciliation, he preached love, and also confronted those that were not willing to do the rightful thing. That's the much I can say. Yes, he's the only one who died on the spot. They're okay. They were just hurt, but they're okay. Up to now, one is the one who was passed on because of COVID. Claire Kirubo, who was from Kisii. Baroda Chebo from Mount Elgon is in the U.S. She went to study in the U.S. and she's still there. I met her once. We have talked when she's in the U.S., when I was in the U.S., and she's doing well. Yes, I was in the funeral. I stayed only for about 1 day in the hospital. Then I was released because I was okay. And during the funeral, there's a lot of commotions there because the synod had to come together, the vice chairman, and I saw a clergy like Aroki, I saw clergy like the clergy, the bishop, Maritas Kogo. I saw Changaj, the old Sherry. I saw this clergy coming together, and they started giving direction to church. At that moment, Sister Evelyn had just come from the States, and she was given an office to do work as an administrator before going back. But then she did not make it back because the diocese had nobody to do the administration work. And I guess that's how she remained and became the administrator and started also working with the old clergy and the members of the synod meeting so that they could give direction to the diocese. I remember that time our bishop now was in charge of the youth, Bishop Dr. Ruto. We were working with him when he was in charge of the youth department. And so all the clergy were involved in how to bring things together in the diocese. There was a very difficult situation where the synod did not allow our late President Moi to come to the funeral. And at the funeral, I remember Sister Pauline Muchina jacking out one of the ministers, Biwot, from the funeral. So at Elgon View, we had a funeral, but there was a lot of tension because people suspected that the government is the one that caused us to have the accident taking away the life of the bishop. As I remember a time when in Pokot in the late 80s when there was hunger in West Pokot, and Bishop had to look for a lot of food to take to West Pokot, and the government was arguing that nobody was suffering, and so he decided to leave for West Pokot. And I remember at Mailiine when the policeman stopped him from going to West Pokot, and said he walked out of his car and started walking like he was walking to West Pokot. So the government was fighting him in all manner because they didn't like him to say anything about what was going on and what was affecting the people. But Bishop boldly talked about it openly. He was never listening to what the government was saying, because the government was trying to mislead the people. But because he was seeing people dying of hunger, he boldly talked about it. So his mission area in Pokot and Turkana, he did quite a lot of work in Pokot and Turkana, opening mission stations, and he's remembered up to date about that.
So when we talk about
burial.
Yeah. Was there any event of the government taking place on that day?
Yeah?
Was there any event taking place on that day?
Oh, the burial, I mean, during the burial is when I realized the dream he was telling when we were going to Busia. That came to me now. Because when we were driving to Busia, I said, Davis, I've had a big dream, and I was preaching to a very big congregation, thousands of people. When I saw this during the burial, I saw thousands of people. And this dawned on me. This is a vision that the bishop had. It was not about what we saw in Busia, but was speaking about his death. And in his death, he preached to many people. At that day, the stadium was crowded. The whole of the town came to a standstill as we were coming from the stadium to bury at these grounds of St. Matthew's. So it was a very huge congregation that nobody has ever experienced before. So that was also a sermon to people. Many people loved him across the country and beyond. So we had very many people, not only in Kenya, but people from outside who came for the funeral. I see people from England, from the US, and many other African church lead bishops coming for the funeral.
During that time, do you remember most of the churches that were already built?
The build.
Yeah, they were already existing.
Oh, yeah. The churches were, I remember in Kimgoron, a Kaptumo church. I remember Kurukung. I remember Nandi, Aldai. I remember there are many churches. I mean, I see in Chepkorio, the church was built in Chepkorio. I see Matun in Moise Bridge, the church was built in Kitale. St. Paul's was built, Gidiwa. St. Paul's in Kitale, St. Paul's Church in Mitume was church built. So there are few churches with a few parishes, very few clergy, and knowing that the Diocese of Eldoret extended all the way from Lodwar to the border of Kericho. So it's a huge mass it was covering. Yes. I had a very good relationship with the bishop of the Catholic bishop here. I think it was Bishop Korire. They had a very good relationship, and whatever they talked, they were in agreement. So they had a very good working relationship. And boldly, many people would say, if you look at the three bishops, the late bishops, our bishop, the late Bishop Muge, and the late Bishop Gitari, and the late Bishop Okulu, they had something, they were moving the country. When they were speaking, everybody listened. when they were speaking in newspapers, quoted them, and they listened to them. So the church was different at that time. It is like really people were living, they were preaching people to live the word of God. They were not just preaching where you listen to the word of God and go home, but you have to live it. That means that confronting the evil in all manner. And that's what we saw him doing, that he confronted any evil in any place, be it in the church itself and be it in the government. He spoke about it. He confronted it. And this made him very well loved by the nation, because people listened to him. And wherever he went to preach, people were many. I remember this occasion when he went to the U.S. and was preaching against homosexuality, and he was had to be escorted out of the airport, out of where he was preaching to the airport, because he boldly confronted homosexuality in the U.S. And this is who he was. He never let anything go without being confronted if it was not to the good of the people.
And if you say about the family, how was it between the family, the wife, and the children?
Well, Bishop loved his family. Bishop loved his family, all of them. And I think the last born was very close. Elizabeth always came in the office, and but Esther, Amon, and Andrew, the bishop loved them. It's the children, he loved his children, and they were all around him. In fact, the children made me feel even closer to the bishop, because they loved, and the way he was living with his children, it was something we learned from, that this is the way you have to be with the children, spending more time with the children. Despite that he was very busy, but he spent time with his children. He spent time with his family. Even if he worked up very late, he walked with his children. He'd go home no matter what time it was. And so he taught us family issues, and freely talked to us and advised us, and he was our figurehead father.
Mimi ni mchungaji Charity Lagat, fika wa parokia hili, tukifanya na mchungaji Emmanuel Toroitich. Ningependa kuchukua nafasi hii kushukuru Mungu, ni kwa sababu ya mipango yake. Nashukuru Mungu pia ni kwa sababu ya kazi ambayo tunafanya, tukikumbuka bishop wetu wa kwanza Alexander Kipsang Muge, ambaye kwa hakika tunasikia mengi ambaye alifanya akiwa askofu. Kama parokia la Bishop Muge, tunachukua nafasi hii kuwakaribisha kuanzia tarehe 11 hadi 18 mwezi wa 8, hili zote tuweze kusherekea na kukumbuka pia uanzilishi wa parokia hili tangu miaka 5 ilipoanzishwa, kwa kukumbuka mambo mazuri ambaye askofu aliweza kutenda. Parokia letu liko na makanisa 4, tukianzia kanisa hili ambaye ni mama Bishop Muge Memorial Chapel. Pia tuko na kanisa letu la All Saints Royot, A.C.K St. Thomas Rescos, na kanisa la St. Stephen's Oasis. Tuko na waumini 600 na kuendelea. Ningependa kuchukua nafasi hii pia kushukuru baba askofu wetu Christopher Ruto kwa kuendelesha kazi hii, na pia kwa kukubali tuweze kuanzisha kwa kukubali parokia hili liweze kuanzishwa. Kama akina mama katika ministry, tunashukuru sana kwa sababu ya askofu kuwa ordain akina mama wa kwanza katika ministry ya uchungaji. Tunashukuru sana kama akina mama, na pia tunasema asante kwa maaskofu waliofuata kwa kusisitiza pia kuwaweka mikono kuwa wachungaji akina mama kwa wingi. Hiyo kama akina mama tunasema asante sana. Pia nafasi hii ningependa kuwashukuru wale ambao walikuwa wachungaji wa kwanza katika parokia hii, mchungaji Kiprono na curate wake Esther Terer, ambao walifanya kazi mpaka mwaka huu wakaweza pia kuacha tukaiendeleza na mchungaji mwenzangu. Pia shukrani nyingi zinaenda kwa PCC members, lay readers ambaye tuko na wao, na pia tuko na macanons ambayo tunafanya kazi pamoja katika parokia hili. Tunachukua nafasi hii kusema asante. Pia nakumbuka nikisoma historia ya baba askofu ambaye alikuwa anafanya kazi kwa hali na mali, na pia alikuwa model wetu kama wachungaji, ambaye alikuwa anafanya bila uoga wowote. So kazi ya Mungu ni kufanya bila uoga, na amekuwa role model wetu kama wachungaji. So tunasema karibuni sana kuanzia tarehe 11 hadi 18 ambaye pia itakuwa kufungua kanisa letu la Bishop Muge Memorial Chapel. Katika wiki yetu tutakuwa na madaktari ambao watakuja kuanzia tarehe 11 tutailaunch siku yetu. Tarehe 12 tutakuwa na madaktari ambao watakuwa pamoja nasi wakipima magonjwa kadhaa katika kanisa hili, na wataendelea mpaka hiyo tarehe 17, ambapo tarehe 17 tutakuwa na pastoral visitation na baba askofu. Tutatembea kwa makanisa yote manne. Tarehe 18 itakuwa ni climax yetu ya kufungua kanisa hili, na pia baadaye tutakuwa na shukrani kwa Mwenyezi Mungu. Asante sana. Karibuni na tuendelee kuombeana kama kanisa la Mungu. Mubarikiwe zote.
Unfortunately, his death was mysterious also, because the road accident was questionable. In fact, every time I pass the place where he died, that's on the way to Tarbo from Eldoret, you actually get a feeling that something wasn't right the way he died. And the investigators never came up with anything thereafter.
Bishop Muge is one of a very rare breed of outstanding religious leaders. Leaders who it will be very difficult to find in current times. Leaders who stood firm not just on issues of corruption but also in issues of good governance at the risk of their lives. And thirdly, it is sad because Bishop Muge still remains in the annals of history as one of the unresolved deaths in Kenya's history, and I think it's unfortunate.
Bishop Muge on many occasions will put government on notice and stand firm on matters of principle. You couldn't question him, and therefore he remains to be a motivation to any all of.
I think it's a good time to remember the late bishop, because I think Kenya is seeing good things happen. We are beginning to see that the bishop was right in his attempt to check the excesses of impunity or of government.
Yes.
I think we can only be happy for him.
Yes.
Except we still we are saddened that he was killed by forces of impunity. So as we try to fight impunity, we must do it knowing that many of our heroes have died for it. So it's a good time.
It's a good time.
It's a good time to do
The reason that we are celebrating Kipsang Muge, more than 20 years since he died, is because he stood for something. And Kenya is yearning for such kind of leaders. We may not remember who was the richest person in 1990 or 1991 when Kipsang Muge Alexander was fighting for pluralism, but we remember him today. So he may not have died a rich person, with a lot of property, but for the integrity that he stood for, we remember him. And I think that is an inspiration to all of us here, and even to Kenyans, that we need to aspire to be remembered in such a manner. Abraham Lincoln said that keeping silent when you're supposed to speak, it makes cowards of men. So I really think Kipsang Muge spoke very boldly. And you remember, it's good to put this in context, he was a Kalenjin, in a Moi government.
Yes.
You see, that was not expected, because then you are coming from the community of the president, you are supposed to toe the line. So really we must respect him, and that is the time we used to respect the church, you remember. Gitaris, Okulus, there are people who would speak and we would know that. In fact, one of them was challenged. I think Henry Okulu was challenged by somebody say that he doesn't have a constituency, and he aptly retorted by saying that my constituency is in the hearts of the people, so it's not defined by the geography.
Charity can pray for us.
Kwa hakika umekuwa mwema kwetu, umetutangulia kwa kila jambo tangia asubuhi mpaka wakati Mwenyezi Mungu umeendelea kuwa pamoja nasi. Endelea Mwenyezi Mungu kutubariki kama kanisa lako, na askofu wetu na viongozi wote. Mwenyezi Mungu, tunaomba baraka zako ziweze kutoka kwako. Hata wakati huu pia tunapoelekea shughuli nyingine, ninaomba Mwenyezi Mungu endelee kutamalaki. Ni asanteni kwa sababu unatupenda. Kwa jina la Mungu Baba, Mwana na Roho Mtakatifu.
Na sasa Mungu, wakati wa kumbukumbu za miaka hizi 41 tangu askofu anzishwe, kumbukumbu pia juu ya miaka karibu 30 pia na moja tangu askofu Muge kulala, na makanisa mbalimbali ambayo yameanzishwa. Yeye kama one of the martyrs ya the church, tunashukuru kwamba damu ya martyrs mara nyingi ni mbegu ya kuzaliwa kanisa la Kristo. Bariki makanisa yote, waanzilishi wa kila rika na kila miaka ambao wametumika Mwenyezi Mungu kupanda na kuweka mbegu za kanisa lako. Bariki pia wanaoeneza habari kupitia online channels, kupitia pia televisheni pamoja na print media. Asanteni kwa kanisa hili la Bishop Muge pamoja na parish lote, waskofu wetu na marafiki wote wa Bishop Muge ambao walifanya kazi kwa karibu wakati wake. Ongoza sisi sasa. Na sasa Mwenyezi Mungu, baraka zako tuomba kwa kila mmoja, sifikie taifa letu la Kenya. Tupate viongozi ambao wataongoza nchi hii kwa njia ya haki, njia ya uwiano na kuleta maendeleo kwa kila mmoja. Bariki kaunti yetu ya Uasin Gishu na kaunti jirani. Bariki makanisa zote ya Kianglikana ama makanisa mengine katika Protestanti, Makatoliki na Orthodox. Bariki kila kanisa, lieneze injili yako kama na ilivyoletwa na wale waliotutangulia, na msingi wa neno lako endelee kuwa thabiti wakati wote. Kwa jina la Mungu Baba, Mwana na Roho Mtakatifu. Amen.